Hey everyone, and welcome to Hack Your Career from AttackIQ and AttackIQ Academy. My name is Keith Wilson. I am the Director of Cybersecurity Education for AttackIQ. Before we get started, I want to remind you, don't forget to ask if you got any questions at all, put them in chat and we'll try and get them across during the interview. And join our Discord server to continue the conversation. So we're going to paste that, the link to that in chat. But if you hop on that Discord server and you've got more questions about what we're discussing on here, and that's helping you navigate or even just break into a new career in cybersecurity, go to our Discord server. We'll see if we can help you out there. So today's guest, I'm super excited for, and I posted about this earlier on LinkedIn. And I always get excited for our guests. We get some great guests on here. This one's different. This one is like reuniting with an old friend. So I go back with this person about 5 or 6 years now, and he's been a great friend and mentor to me. And I think he's going to be a great guest for this show. So I'd like to introduce all of you to the Chief Security Officer for Cybereason, Sam Curry. Sam, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Keith?
I'm doing great. It seems disingenuous if I say great to see you again, because we've been talking for the past week in preparation for this. But it truly is like reuniting with an old friend again. So I'm super excited to have you on.
And I feel the same way. And again, thanks for having me. I'm super looking forward to the conversation. I don't know exactly where you'll take it, but I'm game for pretty much anything.
Yeah. So what I normally try and do is talk to people about how they got into cybersecurity and kind of navigated their career, right? And your story's
It's all over.
a bit different. It's all over, and it's a bit different for a couple reasons. One is the level at which you operate now is a very high sort of executive level. You sit on multiple boards. You advise multiple groups. Like you have a very elevated sort of executive level that we haven't necessarily talked about on this show before. And also you hold, 3 degrees now, but originally 2 degrees, neither of which were in cybersecurity or even technology, really, in information technology. First of all, what were the degrees, just so we can clear those
Yeah.
up?
So I started doing a bachelor's in physics with a minor in languages. I did classical languages, and I speak a few languages, I think you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stopped for a bit, and then I went back and did a degree in literature with a minor in philosophy and finished the first one. So I kind of got a BA and a BS at the same time. And the third one I completed just last month. It's a Master's of Science in Counterterrorism at Nichols College. So, and I did all of those because I could go deep and loved it. And my dad always used to say, if you do what you love, then it's never work. And so I believe in going deep, and that these things are ultimately transferable. So I've heard some people talk about I people and T people. Either you're narrow and deep or you're broad and shallow. I don't accept that. I think you can be deep and broad. It just takes time.
Yeah. So I'm interested, right? Because your main degrees were in physics and around linguistics and English. And where did that crossover begin in cybersecurity, right? Because that's not a direct.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There's not a direct line between linguistics to CISO. Right.
Well, I was always fascinated with the writings of Samuel Delaney, who looked at the Safir-Whorf hypothesis, which is about language and thought. And you'll see traces of things like 1984, which predated him, of course, by Orwell. But I wanted to be a sci-fi writer. So going way back, my dad was the head of computer science and mathematics at university, and so I was always exposed to coding very young. And he was also a linguist too, so that kind of followed. And then after taking the time off, I went, I did some physical security. I was a security guard. I was a bouncer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the very early days, 1989, 90, 91 type. So I'm dating myself here, which I guess is inevitable. But then the transition happened because I was a doc writer. I just wanted to give you the answer, though.
Yeah. At that time, though, when you were when you were doing physical security? Were you thinking of it in terms of physical
No,
security? No, it was
no.
just,
Well, I mean, yeah, we had courses in it and stuff, but I didn't think of it as a career. I'm like, okay, this is going to pay for my
yeah.
education, right? And I had a small startup, and I was in Canada originally, so schooling was a little cheaper.
Mhm.
So I didn't need that much in order to pay for it. But when I finally finished my bachelor's, I plural, I was in the United States, and that was more expensive as somebody who was foreign born at the time. So yeah, but that wasn't where the transition into security came. It came afterwards. I actually wanted to get into biotech. So right around 95, I started to say, okay, where am I going to go? And I stumbled across a startup that was a cybersecurity startup. We didn't call it that then, right? It was information security.
Mhm.
And a very innovative bunch. Actually, the guy who ran the company, his first job out of college was working for my dad. And so I asked him for advice, and he goes, wait a minute, I've known you for years. Do you want to come and help me write the documentation? At that point, the slippery slope had begun. I was delving into cyber from then on, pretty much. That was 26 years ago now.
So
yeah.
Your crossover point then was linguistics, language, English goes to writing documentation, technical documentation
Goes for a cyber company.
for a cyber company.
And then QA, and then R&D, and eventually the record after that, right? But and then now 4-time CISO. So yeah.
But and there was a point that you hit on that I want to go back to as well, and that's the informal education, right? You sort of got this informal education from your parents, who did a lot of, or your father anyway, did a lot of coding, also a linguistics major. So you overlay that on top of the English degree, I can easily see technical documentation path there.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a friend who said, my father clearly was a big influence. One thing he used to say is, if you ever want to do something, you always will be able to. So that kind of stuck with me. And I had a friend in high school who used to tell me, you can remember anything, you just have to want to badly enough. And I really pondered that for a while. And I realized I could do pretty much anything I set my mind to. It was a question of effort and time and resources, of course. And so, I mean, I think I had like $90 to my name in a suitcase, and I started technical writing in those days for about 30,000 Canadian a year, which is not much money. And I fell in love with it. I just kept doing it. I didn't believe there was anything too hard to do. I think a lot of us get set early on. We have maybe a sciences teacher, and we go off the arts, or we have an arts teacher, we go off the sciences. And I don't think that's as much of a problem for this generation, by the way. But we tend to put ourselves in straitjackets, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I followed where my career went. I had a woman named Janet Chandler who used to have the desk next to me in 97. And she said, never let anything go by your desk without having a piece of it. She doesn't mean be obnoxious. What she meant was, all of these opportunities happen. And you really should grab them as they go, because you can either add to it or take part in it. Instead of saying, hey, that's not my job, you can say, hey, let me help with that. And that's been probably the best advice I ever got.
That is great advice. So thinking in terms of that, how can I help with that? Because you know what, that's something that I definitely noticed from working with Sam too, is Sam is always the guy, you come to him with something, and the first question he asks is, great, how can I help? Right. And it's not a selfish gesture in itself. I mean, generally asking somebody, how can I help, will eventually be self-serving, but in the moment, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking, hey, how can I help you? Right. And I don't think a lot of people take the opportunity to do that, to stop and go, how can I help? Right. Because there's so many things. I know I'm guilty of it. There's things that come across my desk where I'm like, I don't know how I can help with that. And so I just ignore it instead of asking the question, how can I help? So, and I think that really helps bridge those networks, right? People are always talking about building networks, building your network and stuff. The best way to build a network of people is through asking them, how can I help? Right. So that way, when it's your time, when you need the help, you got an army of people willing to help you.
There's also some weaknesses with it, by the way, because sometimes people want to help you. Right. And it can be very difficult to remember to delegate things. So I sometimes have to stop my natural tendency to say, how can I help? Because I fundamentally believe anyone can do anything if they're just supported enough. And I have to realize that sometimes they want to have ownership. They want to have accountability. There's a satisfaction in in taking something by the horns and really owning it.
Mhm.
One of my bosses, Art Coviello, he used to separate stress from pressure. Have you heard this one, Keith? Have you heard the difference between the
Mm-mm.
two?
No.
So stress is when there's stuff on your back and you've got to get it done and you have no idea how to do it, and that's not healthy.
Mhm.
Pressure is when you have a lot of things you have to get done on your back and you know exactly how to do it. Now it's a time management and resource management problem. What you've got to do is remove stressors or turn them into pressure, and then handle the pressure and set expectations right. So I think this is super important. I've got to make sure that people have the chance to have accountability. With accountability comes power. So I've got to remember, against my better nature, that not to do things for people, to
Mhm.
do as much as they need to stand on their own. And you mentioned mentoring earlier. I hope I didn't do that to you. I hope I was able to give you a chance to shine in your own right.
Yeah,
Instead
of course, of course.
stepping up too much there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my point with that too was, and it's interesting that you bring up delegation, because I didn't think of that as the other half, right?
Mm.
Because I think at a certain point in your career, if you decide to go like the leadership route, and that could be technical leadership as well, it could be team lead or something like that, you have to hit to a point to where you have to switch from how can I help to, how can I delegate? Which
Yeah.
may actually help answer the first one of how can I help? If somebody comes to me asking me for something that I can do, but I know I've got somebody on my team that would rather do it and that could do a better job at it or wants the chance to improve themselves, I can delegate it to that person. And that way I'm killing two birds with one stone.
Well, and it's important to realize what we want is we have to keep in mind, work is not a thing to be avoided by workers. Work is a thing to be embraced as an opportunity. And if we start thinking of people as wanting work, it becomes much easier,
Mhm.
right? People want to be able to say, "I did these things, and I'm doing these things," and they want the satisfaction of seeing them completed. Carrying pressure and completing a task is immensely rewarding. You're doing a disservice to people if you don't let them do that.
Have you ever on your to-do list, have you ever written down something that you've already done just so you can check it off?
Sadly, yes, that's a dopamine thing.
Everybody
Like,
has. Everybody has.
yes, like I started this morning with 8 things to do, and I've done 3, but I'm just gonna, yeah, use the cross out font, right? The strike through.
Yeah. So I had a question here yeah. So you sit on several boards now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Advisory and directors.
Advisory and board of directors. So I know for a lot of people in this role, or something that we hear a lot in the news, I want to get your input on it. Having these board levels discussion, and one of the reasons we started the show is the talent gap in cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
The X million of empty jobs that there will be by this date, and that number and that date change. But the problem always stays the same. There is this gap. How is that being viewed at a board level,
Well,
if at all?
it is in different ways. The thing is, we're producing more graduates than we've ever produced before in information security /cyber. It just is that the skill gap, the skills to know is growing, and the number of jobs we need is growing faster still. Which means I think we're not being creative enough in trying to bring new people in and make it easier to learn. I don't mean abstract it too much so people don't understand what's happening. I think we've got to try and make this not just more inviting, but a less esoteric, a less tradition bound industry, even though we're very young, relatively speaking. At the board level, obviously I work for a vendor, so the question is, where can we get the talent, right? Because we're growing at an enormous rate at Cybereason. But this is true of everyone. So where do you go? How do you pull the best talent? And it's not just an attracting talent. It's, what are we going to have to do to foster more? How are we going to create more people in our industry? And I think the answer is not any one part of the industry. It's all of us. It's academia, it's public sector, it's private sector, it's mentoring. So I live in Massachusetts. I take part in Mass Cyber Center here in Massachusetts, does mentoring of graduates as they go out into the workforce. I do that personally. People on my team do that. It's rolling up your sleeves. I believe if you just get started, you can do it. I also work with colleagues. Carissa Varma is one of them in South Africa, and some other folks for a group we call Hacking into Cybersecurity. So it's right in the same line is this. It's a LinkedIn group. We should probably look what we could do together. It's a
Absolutely.
global attempt to try to say not just bringing people into cyber, but making sure they have jobs. Here's a tragedy. I get a lot of people, because I have this open policy. Anyone can contact me, and if you're just commercial, after a while, I'm gonna be like, you're banned. But in LinkedIn, anyone can contact me, and I will always try to help. And I've had a lot of people, they just got their degree, and the first rung on the ladder is too high, because they might have an internship, but entry-level positions should not require 3 years of experience. It's
Correct.
ridiculous. And that happens. And so I'll start calling CISOs, and I say, hey, got a young person, he or she wants to start, and you have a position advertised. Does it really need 2 or 3 years? And usually they go, well, I don't know. Let me check. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it shouldn't take, a CISO paying attention to a random contact to make that happen.
Yeah. So I think a better suggestion then is CISOs rethink what they actually need versus what they're posting. Right.
Yeah. When I think back on my career, and Keith, this didn't kind of come out, but maybe people will have detected it. I don't think I was ever qualified to do what I did when I did it.
I've never been qualified to do what I do when I did, except for this job. If anybody from AttackIQ is listening, I am completely qualified for this job.
You definitely are. But until recently, that was the case. Now, part of that was because I was in the right place at the right time, right? But part of it was also when I started, there was no way to get there. Right? There was no getting a bachelor's in InfoSec was not a thing. It was computer science or electrical engineering, and that was a transferable thing, right? You had to get almost some practicum experience in order to be in this bit, which is what I got. But now we've sort of got what path do I follow? And I don't know if the way I got here is actually still available. We need to bring some of that back. That find people with the right attitude and spirit and some base skills, and bring them into the team. Now, you can't do it if everybody is in this state, but bring folks in and let them have a try. At Cybereason, we've got some folks who were, one I can think of was a history major, one was a math major. They've both gone on to do cyber careers, but they didn't come in an explicitly security position, right? So one of them is now an analyst. Actually, both are. So yeah, I mean, they can get there, but we're not thinking that way. I remember when I was at McAfee, must be 20 years ago now, somebody had put that they wanted somebody with basically hacking skills on public websites with 10 years of experience. I'm like, exactly what websites were they hacking in 1991, people? Like,
yeah.
Really? Yeah, somebody didn't think it through. They didn't do the math. And I think there's too much of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as somebody, I've had to recently start writing job postings and stuff, and it's one of those things too. And with Academy too, we're kind of building something new, at least for AttackIQ and cyber, and a little bit to cybersecurity. So there, again, not a definitive path in how we do things. So as I'm sitting here writing a listing for a job, I'm having to ask myself, well, how much skill do I need to have? And then at the same time, putting down, like, because, time in role or time doing something doesn't necessarily equal knowledge. You can sit and just, languish in a position for 5 years and not do anything and not learn anything new, and still come into a job technically qualified because you spent 5 years doing AD administration or whatever. Technically you did this one thing. You may or may not have been good at it. So I'm wondering if there's a better way to qualify people. Right.
It's an excellent point. There's been some studies into what's the best way to find the best candidate. It turns out interviewing is terrible, by the way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But testing seems a bit odd. Some people just don't test well. We have this problem in general. Cyber is it's an active sport. It's not passive, right? Well, what we do is how we think and approach problems and how we solve things where the clock matters. Now, yes, you can set up compliance, and yes, there's controls to deploy, and yes, we have to set up processes and all the rest. But in the end, it's about how people respond to the moment, what mental models they build. So, I'll go back to my dad. He told me years ago there was a study, and I should chase it down one day, that said the same mental skills are used for writing, for music, for mathematics, and for coding. And so if you find somebody relatively deep in those things who's not technophobic, they're probably a good candidate for entry level. But what you want is somebody who enjoys problem solving and puzzles. So when you're talking to them, they may be nervous, they might not interview well. Try to get to so what do you enjoy doing? What do you enjoy solving? Are you you get some downtime at work? Are you the sort of person who's just going to kick up and browse the internet? Nothing wrong with looking at the internet from time to time. Or are you someone who's like, hey, I want to go back and tackle that thorny problem or pick up a new skill?
It's funny that you kind of went that way. So I'm a big fan. I don't know if you've ever heard of Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist. He's got like a podcast through NPR. I think it's through NPR. The guy knows a lot, has written several books. Big fan of his books. He posted something the other day about the number one indicator of like a good hire, I guess, for lack of a better term, or somebody that would make a good hire, is their willingness to learn.
Yeah. And to be continually learning.
Yeah.
I try to live it myself. I mean, hey, I just did a master's. It was COVID, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all this spare time? Little did I know that I wouldn't have that much. In fact, my son's sitting right next to me because we're now everything all the time. But I was like, okay, maybe I'll go back and do that degree I was interested in, just because it was interesting, and frankly, it was an amazing learning experience, and it brought something to everything that I do, even though it seems not that closely related.
Sure.
But for that reason, every time, and my employees who might be listening, every time somebody says, I really want to go learn, I'm like, that's it. The company will help you. We'll find a way. We'll figure out the time, help you with cost. We'll help you with whatever you need. Because it's just, brains learning are the way to stay nimble. And frankly, nimble minds are what solve security problems.
So in that spirit, here's something that I've thought about doing. I don't want to get your thoughts on it. You've been a leader longer than I have. Every week, I'd like to ask the people on my team, what did you learn this week? Right. And it could be anything from, I haven't done this yet. So for the people that work with me, this is going to be a surprise. So this could be something along the lines of saying, what did you learn this week? And the answer could be, oh, well, I made this mistake, so I learned never to do this thing again. Or, hey, I picked up this new skill because I was taking this class on LinkedIn, and the lesson that I did this week taught me this, right? Because I think that encourages it encourages a couple things, right? One, it encourages learning because it uses peer pressure. If everybody else on the team is telling you I'd learned this, that, and the other thing, then you're going to want to do it too, right? Just because everybody else is doing it. All the cool kids are doing it, so you're going to want to do it too. The other part is sharing that knowledge with other people is going to inspire them to either, they may have an interest that they didn't even know existed until they heard you talk about it, or it may keep them from making the same mistake you just made this past week that you learned a lesson from. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, the funny thing is, and this could be, as you mentioned earlier, where I'm at in my career and my age, the more I'm my whole self and my true self, the more people want to interact with me. It's true when I do an executive bridge to another firm. It's true, I think, with my employees. It's true when I'm talking to my peers, right, within the company. I would encourage you not to limit it just to what they've learned about the job, but to broaden it. So
sure.
When somebody's truly passionate about something, it's infectious. And a lot of things in human experience are, in fact, interchangeable in some ways. So if somebody's interested in archaeology, they just wrote a book on it. Tell us about it, right? In fact, we have some channels on Slack in the company that you would think, like, why would you have that? We have one for science fiction and fantasy fans. We have ones for history buffs. There's the I Love Dogs channel, right? Bring your passion, but if you bring something that's work related, it could help everyone. But you might be surprised that someone is struggling and really wants to get into a space and hear your learning and your takeaways. I think I became the cyber person I am not just because of the InfoSec stuff that I did. It's the whole package. So I would encourage you to say, hey, bring a book recommendation that you just finished. Come and tell us about a course you've taken. Tell us about a thing you've learned on the job or off.
Yeah.
And if you've got to pass for a week or two, that's fine. But come and speak up.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way. If anybody out there is a leader or a future leader, maybe that's something you consider implementing with your teams. Ask them, what did you learn this week, or what did you learn this month? So something I wanted to go back to, because we've talked, the word mentor has come up a lot during this interview. I mentioned it at the very top.
And then I brought it back. Yeah, sorry.
And we've been talking about it several times. So And we talked about how you've mentored many people throughout your career. Now, is there anything with the mentees that you've worked with that they've had in common in their successes or their failures? Like what are the common successes or failures that you're seeing throughout all these varied people that you're working with?
Wow, that's a horribly hard thing to summarize. Well, I think there are many ways to mentor. There are many ways to be a mentee. I think everybody should be mentoring and being mentored. Like I have a board of people that I consider my personal board that I turn to for advice, especially in areas where I'm weak and I look for their guidance. I think the important thing is that a mentor, first of all, not have any interest in the person's success, but their success. So that's why it shouldn't be a management relationship, right? It shouldn't be somebody who has a fiscal interest in your success, for instance. And it should be focused on you achieving some objective that you want. Sometimes it's finite, sometimes it's ongoing, but it's never a superior to a subordinate relationship. It's here's somebody who can bring something to help me make me better at this space, and everybody needs that, and everybody should be continuously paying it forward and doing it. As for patterns, that's tough. I've mentored people on the business side, on the security side, students, people older than me, and I've been mentored by many along the way. I did not get here by myself, right? I stand on the shoulders of giants, and hopefully I do them proud. That's the idea.
So let me ask you this: as a mentor, what do you think, and not necessarily for somebody to reach out to you, but for them to, if they've got somebody in mind that they think like, hey, this person would be a good mentor for me, what's the best way for them to build that relationship or start that relationship? How would you like to be approached?
Well, if somebody says, hey, I'd like you to mentor me, I will almost always say, hey, okay, let's get a call and see if, first of all, if there's chemistry and if I'm the right person. I've had several people ask me, and I'm not the right person. I was just talking to someone earlier, and they were talking about a really cool technical idea, but they wanted to go to market in a different way. And I said, actually, I know someone better than me for this. Why don't I make a connection and see if that makes sense? The thing about networks is they want to be used, and it's less about mentorship than helping people in your network as a community. That's super important.
Yeah. So you're saying helping people make connections.
I just love it. See, I believe anyone can do anything, and I love helping people get to that point where they feel a sense that they did it and they actually accomplished something. It's just like in management, I feel I'm highly successful when someone is promoted to my level or above in any organization or in their career. I joke that means I'll have lots of friends who will hire me when I'm old and crusty, or older and crustier. But no, seriously, I love looking around and seeing leaders in the industry doing great things and saying, I was part of your journey somewhere.
So it sounds like you view your network a bit as a bit of an ecosystem, right?
It's a community. I mean, it has to be.
It's a community that you are curating, though. It's
to
an extent.
The result is it gets curated. If I was doing it to curate, it wouldn't be sincere.
Right.
I happen to sincerely want people to do well and to help them, and as a result, it winds up being a really great network. At least I find it that way. And I'm terrible at networking. Actually, tools like LinkedIn help a lot, but I should mention I don't consider LinkedIn to be a community of trust by default. In other words, anyone can connect to me, but that just because someone's connected to me doesn't mean I trust them. And if they prove themselves to be unworthy of connection, they're spamming me or doing something nasty, they're banned. That's from my connection. So
yeah, I mean, my connection with somebody isn't an endorsement of that person. Right. I think that'd be silly to think that. Right?
I'm waiting for someone to come out with, I did an academic study where I reached out to 2,000 CISOs and they all accepted my request. See how foolish they were? No, shame on you for that one. Right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too that let's talk about that for a minute. Abuse of your network, right? Which doesn't happen too much. It probably happens more on LinkedIn than anything else. Have you ever been worried that, so you've got somebody from the outside that's asking you for help, right? And you meet with them and you listen to their pitch and you go, you know what, there's somebody else that's going to work better for you. They're a part of your network. At that point, you're endorsing this person now to say, hey, maybe you should work with them. Are you ever worried about that?
Not now. I was to begin with. because
Yeah.
I think the nature of LinkedIn has changed over the years, and other social networks have other pluses and minuses. I don't think people now take being connected or linked to be a tacit endorsement. But if you know, I will actually tell people I won't put an endorsement on your page because I don't know you well enough.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about the LinkedIn side of it. I'm talking
Mm,
about somebody that
just
you've
generally.
even
Oh
met,
yeah,
but they're still fairly new to you, right? They're still somebody that
that
you're just
happens.
building a relationship with.
It happens all the time. So some people will say, "Hey, so and so name dropped you and said that you're a friend." Now, here's the thing. I've been in this 30 years. Sometimes I don't remember. And that sounds terrible, but I've worked with
I get it.
thousands of people. Sometimes I have to go and do a little research and go, oh, yeah, I worked with this person, 22 years ago. And it's an opportunity to reconnect. Sometimes I don't. And I explicitly say to the person asking, I don't, but don't hold that against them.
No. Right.
Because, I got 15,000 LinkedIn official contacts. I'm not showing off. That's just like a number. Like, obviously I don't know all 15,000 that well, and being first degree does not mean we're friends.
Right.
So but yeah, that happens all the time. But people know how to have a discussion about that, and don't be swayed by it. Just because somebody knows someone isn't the reason to hire them. It's also not the reason to not hire them.
So one thing I want to talk to you about too before we get too close, because we're starting to come around like the home stretch
How does
here,
it
right?
fly by like that? I guess. Yeah. So any pace you want, any question, go ask me anything. Yeah.
So what were the most, and this can be a good detailed answer too. And that's why I want to ask this now. What were the most important actions you took to move forward in your career?
Never say no, really. I mean, that sounds terrible that I don't say no to things, and sometimes I just can't. But I mean, generally speaking, an opportunity comes up and I follow it, and I have a personal mission. I think maybe that's the most important thing, Keith.
Personal mission.
I do have a personal mission, and like when I came to Cybereason, I explicitly moved for that mission. I wasn't leaving a bad situation. I was moving to one that got me closer to what I cared about.
Would you mind sharing what that personal mission is?
I've got a finite amount of time on this earth and a finite amount of energy. And I realize there's a lot of waste, and maybe there should be just because of how I think about things. But I want to apply myself with the most leverage to make a difference. And by difference, I mean something really specific. Right now, bad guys win too much and they innovate too fast. I've got to find where to spend my energy. It's the advisory boards that I join, the boards of directors, the job that I do, is because I believe it's the best place that I can apply myself and have a result. And I will continue to trade up with that to have a better impact. And the end result that I want is we expect to win in defense. I'd love to see these attackers just not have a job and not have an opportunity. And I want to have that kind of effect. I found myself sitting at RSA, and I had a really good executive position there. And I said, I'm not able to do the most with RSA that I can with my career. That's why I left. Same thing is true when I left McAfee back in the day. And I'm not slamming those companies. All companies go through ups and downs. But that's what's enabled me to make decisions. Obviously, I make money. Obviously, I have a family I have to take care of like anyone else.
Yeah, money is the byproduct.
My mission is the yardstick. And I don't say no to opportunities to chase my mission and do more of it.
That's interesting that you bring that up too. And it's a great point. There's a lot of psychology behind that as well. That if you have this personal mission that you tie to the work that you do, there's a better chance you'll avoid burnout. You'll be happier in work. You'll be more focused. You'll be there's so many positive things.
It's motivating.
It is motivating because you
and
can
everybody around me
back.
knows it. They know that I live and breathe it, right? So they know how to approach me to do things.
Yeah, and you can always point back to that and say like, okay, if you feel like you're lost, right? Maybe you're at a company and you're not really feeling happy there anymore. You're not sure why. You've got that guiding light you can go back to and go, well, this is my mission, my personal mission. Does the company still align with that and take me to that? Yep. Or are they not meeting that? Or is there, and may not even be the company's fault, situations have changed and maybe there's another company that better aligns to your mission out there, like you said, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think
and so a new opportunity comes up and you go, wait, is this better for my rank, career, income? Most of that's immaterial, right? I mean, if you are leaning in and doing the best you can, really should have a purpose. When you're sitting there going, what do I care about? Am I satisfied? And it's a thing to chase. It's a journey. So I have left companies for that mission. I have joined companies. I've actually said no to better financial opportunities. And I've looked back and gone, wow, of those two companies, I went this way instead of this way, and I would have made more money that way. And I don't care. I have no regrets about it.
So I got a question from one of the viewers. So for somebody starting out with a BBA, so I'm going to assume Bachelor's Business Administration and security certificates, what would be your advice to get started in cybersecurity?
Try to get into a company in any function that does the cyber is what I would do. It depends on where you are, what opportunities exist, and more remote is possible. I actually have a woman on my team who joined the team, but she didn't join my security team. She joined the help desk in IT because we had cyber in our name. And then later she made a transfer to the information security department.
So you're saying not even necessarily go to, company X. Don't go to Citibank and say I want to work in security. Maybe find a security vendor and go, I want to work at this security vendor because it's going to get me just a step closer. It's
start as a BDR and become an SE, start as a salesperson and get into marketing, start as a marketing person and move into et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of people in my security department who didn't set out to be security people and then studied security and then became security people. They started as other things. And in some case they came from customer success over, they came from support over, they came from SEs over, right? So my advice is find a place that you qualify at entry level that is at one remove from the security function, but go to a security company. There's a lot of us. There's also services companies. We're a big industry now, and all of us are hiring. It's a great space to be in. So somebody with this bachelor in business administration and some security certificates is a shoo-in for non-technical roles, at which point they can rub shoulders with and see if it's for them and pick up the skills. And you can do that. I've seen it done.
Yeah, that's a great point, because at that point you've got a leg up on any of the other just general business candidates that have a bachelor of business, because you also have security certificates on top of that.
But don't even see yourself in competition with the other BBAs, right? Many of those BBAs are there to do business, and they're there to follow a different track. You follow don't set yourself in opposition to anybody else in the department. Compete against what you want to be. And I know that sounds hard because you're like, where do I even begin? But you can take courses through online resources. You can take more certificates, but in particular, you get to know the people in the department. They get to know you, and they're like, you know what, this person could do this. Let's put them on a career path that gets them in the door. And usually, it depends on the company, but if it's a good company, they're going to encourage you to expand within the company and take on new roles. Lateral movement is a big deal. So just get in the door.
Awesome. Well, great advice, Sam. And we've got a final segment that we're going to do for the show. And before we do that, so let's go ahead and bring in Corrine. I want to introduce everybody to Corine.
Hi.
She's the head of global talent acquisition for AttackIQ. We've got a new segment with her. And before we do that, though, Sam, I want to take a minute to thank you for being on. I'm sure our listeners or viewers appreciate it. I know I did.
Thanks for having me. Seriously, it's always fun to talk.
The advice you gave was great, and I really do appreciate it. And I hope your son doesn't have COVID. I hope all that goes fine, and that he can get back to school soon. So for our listeners and viewers, I wanted to have Corine on because we wanted to be able to give you specific advice from an expert in the other side of getting the job. That's the recruitment side. We're going to bring Corine on regularly to give you her tips and her advice for getting a job. And what are you going to talk to us about today, Corine?
Yeah. And so the focus of today is really talking about storytelling, and fresh off of Sam's great appearance, which I really enjoyed, I couldn't help but notice there were so many threads in his journey that pointed to the importance of storytelling in your career. And, just starting with where Sam left off, he was telling us about his story, which I'm sure all of us felt a dynamic connection to what he was saying in terms of, what makes you special? It's you, it's your story. And one of the quotes that I pulled out from what he said is, I am who I am because of the whole package. So it wasn't oh, me, Sam, all of these great security credits. It's the fact that he has multiple degrees. He has a background in physics. He has a background in language. And so thinking about that whole package in his story, that is what makes him a compelling leader. Another quote pulling out directly from Sam is, "The more I am my true and whole self, the more people will want to engage with me." And so it's just highlighting, even in this narrative and this journey today, how important storytelling is. And the interesting thing is that Sam also alluded to the power of building your story through helping others tell their story. So whether you're in a leadership role and you think, hey, I'm living my story, I'm living my experience, but maybe part of living your story and your experience is also holding open the door for others, and finding out ways to draw their story out of them, and finding ways to connect to stories that might be interweaving at the perfect time in history. And maybe that's even connecting you with a job opportunity and, developing your story as a leader, but also developing your story as that new entry level person that's just starting in their career. So we see this beautiful cycle of how storytelling can shape people's journeys, and even beyond that, shape people's experience of this life. Beyond that, I think that cybersecurity as an industry is incredibly ripe for storytelling. So one of the books I'm reading right now is Sandworm. And I think that, number one, this is a great book. You should read it. But also it's highlighting how important it is to storytell in our own industry. We are doing something incredibly noble, which is making the world safe to compute. And that's something that impacts everyone in any generation, any position in life. And so being able as an industry to tell that story in a compelling fashion and bring people like you on the journey with us is so important. And lastly, just to kind of wrap things up and bring it back down to earth, because, hey, we want to understand how to level up our careers. How does storytelling help us do that? So for the person who had the question about, hey, I have a BBA, I have some security certifications, how do I, get started in this field? And my advice to you would be, what is your story? Why did you pursue that BBA path instead of, maybe going on the more traditional route? And maybe in the answer to that question, you will find something that's really fruitful. I'll wrap up really quickly and say that after last week's session, I was able to connect with one of our viewers here on Hack Your Career. So I'll just give a shout out to Joel Belisario, who did share his story with me, and we had an amazing conversation. So just to sum it all up, that's my advice: is get out there, figure out what your story is, and start building it with others. Leave the door open for that connection. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Corrine. Thanks, Sam, again. And if you are interested in an open position at AttackIQ, we have them. You can go to attackiq.com. I think it's /careers. We'll get you to the page. So plenty of open positions for those that are looking, and you'll get to talk to Corrine. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.